The last part of your introduction is going to be writing your thesis statement. Do not worry, the thesis statement is not as difficult as individuals oftentimes think to write. And that's for a couple different reasons. The thesis of this speech is much different than that from an essay or a research paper. It is going to be the last part of the introduction that you give. So you've already done your attention getter, you've revealed your topic, and now we're going to give our thesis statement. It's the last part of that introduction, and it is going to be clearly communicating to your audience exactly what this speech is going to cover and how you're going to do it. Every single speech that we give in this class can be approached the exact same way of this writing pattern I'm going to show you today. So let's take a look here first. Remember, we speak in first person in this class because we are writing in that same way. We want to write in the style that we would speak. So when you start to see me write a thesis statement, you're going to see a lot of those personal you, I's. Remember, that's how we want to speak and talk in our natural voice for our audience. If you do not understand this concept of the thesis, contact me as soon as possible because we will be utilizing the same form each speech. To understand it now is going to make learning in the long run much easier. So what's a thesis made of? Well, your thesis is a combination of two different things. What the speech is about and how you will talk about what that speech is about. Let's take a moment and consider. So what is this speech about, y'all? Well, if we look back at the prompt, right here, it lets us know, oh goodness, a speech of introduction should be brief, but is designed to allow the audience to get to know you on a more personal level. Well, how exciting. It tells us right there in the prompt exactly what the purpose of this speech is. And the purpose is to introduce yourself to us. And so how are we going to get to know you a little bit better? So what this speech is about is, in fact, you. So now if we have the what of this speech, we need to think about the how. So how are you going to talk to us about yourself? How will you utilize different aspects of your identity, of yourself, and communicate that to us? So what we want to see here, y'all, is through these things we call main points. So if we're thinking back about how our structure is much like that we've seen before of an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, the body portion of our speech is the main points. You may have heard about these as body paragraphs if you've taken an English class before. But if we wanted to look at what main points are, the main points are the backbone of your talk. They play an important role in helping you prioritize, focus, and sequence your information. And that's going to be key. Remember, we want to logically communicate our ideas to our audience. And so we can prioritize what is most important based upon our audience. What maybe they want to know. Focus, because we only have a specific amount of time. And then finally, sequence our information. Now, what does that sequencing really mean? I'm going to talk to you about that in 1 second because we'll talk about how to sequence. But right now, I want you to consider your timing. Because we have a speech of 2 to 3 minutes, there's something called balance that we want to look at. How do we start to balance our idea? In public speaking, the introduction should be about 15 to 20% of your entire speech, whether that's a speech of 20 minutes or whether that's a speech of 2 to 3 minutes like ours is. So in this case, if we think, well, our introduction should be about 45 seconds to a minute in length. Additionally, your conclusion now, even smaller. A conclusion in speaking is going to be much different than that in writing an essay, the purpose and the focus. So really a conclusion in speaking is one where we are just closing and getting out of there. Then, in looking at those time breakdowns, it gives us some information about our body. How much time do we have to spend? So if we're spending about 1 minute in the introduction, 1 minute in the conclusion, that only gives us about like 1 minute, if you will, or 2 minutes in that body paragraph. So We want to start to balance that 2 to 3 minutes of time however we can. And that makes us start to think, okay, then what do we want to consider? What do we want to put into our main points? I encourage each of us to choose anything that we really want to talk about. But we want to remember about our pattern of organization. And this is what I was saying about how to logically organize. And these patterns of organization, you're going to hear this term a lot throughout the semester. But it's how you organize your main points for the purpose, for the audience, and the logical flow of ideas. And if we think about that, it's how are we going to put these main points? We will start to learn about the many different types of organizational patterns for informative speaking, which is essentially what this speech is, an informative speech about you. But the idea is that what do we want to start? How do we want to organize those concepts about us? What would we need to know maybe first or second or third? Does it have some kind of sequential order? Ideally, in this speech, you are simply going to be picking different topics. If you go back to the prompt and you look at like things like cultural background or hobbies, your major, what your goals and aspirations in life are, each of these are unique, what we call topics. And topical organization, as it says here, is going to represent, so for you each, if we were doing topical organization, each of your main points is going to be a unique topic that represents an aspect of who you are. So I'll tell you a little bit about my family maybe, or my job, or like I said, a place I like to visit or go on vacation, something like that. So let us go ahead and put this all together. If we're going to write our thesis, we're going to need the what and the how. And you are more than welcome to take the exact thing that I'm writing and simply copy and paste it and put in your own main points if you would like. For example, the what, if I stated, for you to get to know me better, how will we do that? I will tell you about my family, my job, and my favorite hobby. I know that now my main points are going to be the family, job, and hobby. Topically organized, 3 main points, no more than 3 main points, so only 2 to 3 main points for that 2 to 3 minute speech. And in this case, when you do put it all together, for you to get to know me better, I will tell you about my family, my job, and my favorite hobby. And when it comes together in this way, we now are clearly communicating to our audience as we draw to the close of our introduction what exactly we're going to be focusing on for the duration of the period. But also, what is the purpose within each of those? Oh, to tell us about you. Go ahead and try to practice a little bit on your own. Think about brainstorming a couple questions. What do you want and love to talk about? If you are excited about choosing these main point topics, you will show that in your delivery. Also, what 2 to 3 topics would maybe be best to help us understand who you are? Are there certain aspects about your personality, your dynamics, the way you work, something unique to you that you would want to communicate to your classroom audience? This is your first impression, so it's an opportunity to think, what type of individual would I like to be seen as, to be known as in this classroom? How do I want to present myself in that way to make that impression, whether it be the tone or what I do speak about? And then lastly, what are relevant, exciting, or of interest to your audience? Like what things are relevant or exciting, interesting to your audience? Think about that also. How could that maybe start to change your decision what you speak about? So go ahead and write a couple of these ideas up on your own. And when you are ready to move on to the next part of writing this introduction speech, you can move on to our next video. Remember, let me know if you don't get this idea of the thesis. I'm only an email away.